Turn me in, Dad. I broke the law and chose justice over my own father. I committed a crime, I knew it. And instead of letting my father, a judge, make it disappear, I walked into a news station and told everything. 24 hours later, I was in juvenile detention. 24 hours after that, I walked out free. My father never walked back into his courtroom. My name is Caleb Morrison, and the most honest thing I ever did nearly destroyed my family. But it was also the only thing that let me live with myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start with a crime. It starts with a name that followed me everywhere I went in this town. Morrison, in Hargrove, Virginia. Population 11,000, give or take. The name Morrison meant one thing: the law. My father, Judge Richard Morrison, had sat on the family court bench for 19 years. He coached Little League on weekends. He shook hands at every church social. He was the kind of man who got plaques with his face on them. And I was his son, which meant I was supposed to be perfect. I wasn't. I was 16 when it happened. It was a Friday night in October, the kind of cold that bites at your ears and makes your breath hang in the air like smoke. My two best friends, Derek and Mason, had been talking for weeks about the old Hargrove Rail Depot. Abandoned since the 80s, sitting on the edge of town like a rusting skeleton. The plan was simple and stupid, the way only 16-year-olds can make plans. We were going to break in, explore, take some photos, maybe film it for social media. I knew it was trespassing. Derek knew it was trespassing. Even Mason, who wasn't exactly the sharpest, knew it was trespassing. We did it anyway. What we didn't know was that the depot had been recently purchased. A private developer had fenced it off, installed cameras, hired a security company. What started as urban exploration became something the police report would later describe as criminal breaking and entering with intent to vandalize. The cameras caught everything, our faces, clear as daylight. Derek and Mason were picked up within 48 hours. I wasn't, because someone made a phone call first. My father was sitting at the kitchen table when I came home that Sunday morning. His reading glasses were on. His coffee was untouched. He had a look on his face I'd never seen before, something between fury and calculation. He slid a photograph across the table. It was a still frame from the depot security camera. Me. Clearly me. Climbing through a broken window. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then he said, and I remember every word, "This is going to go away, Caleb. Do you understand me? This is going to go away, and you are never going to speak about it to anyone." I asked him what he meant. He told me he'd already spoken to the detective handling the case, that my name would be kept out of the report, that Derek and Mason would face their consequences, whatever they were, but that I would not be dragged into it alongside them. He said he was protecting me. He said he was protecting the family. He said this was what fathers do. I sat there and I nodded, and I didn't say anything, but something inside me went very, very quiet, the way things go quiet right before they break. I want to tell you what kept me up that night, because it wasn't fear of getting caught. It wasn't guilt exactly, not the shallow kind, not the "oh, no, what will people think" kind. It was Derek. Derek's family didn't have a father who was a judge. Derek's dad worked double shifts at a warehouse outside town. Derek's mom cleaned houses on weekends. They couldn't afford a private attorney. They couldn't make phone calls that made things go away. Derek was going to sit in front of a juvenile court judge, maybe even my father, and answer for something we all did together. And I was going to walk free because of my last name. I thought about that all night. By morning, I had made my decision. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell my mother, who would have panicked and called him immediately. I called the one person I trusted completely, my older cousin Nate, 23 years old, pre-law student, and the only person in my family who had ever looked at my father with clear eyes. I told Nate everything. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what you have to do." I said yes. He said, "Are you sure? Because once you do this, you can't undo it." I said I was sure. What I did next was something I had thought through carefully. I didn't just walk into a police station, because the police station in Hargrove reported, in various ways, to the same ecosystem my father operated in. I needed something public, something that couldn't be quietly buried. I called the regional news station. A journalist named Sandra Cho had been covering a series of stories on juvenile justice in our county. I'd seen her name in articles. I found her work email on the station's website. I sent her a message that said, "I have a story about a judge protecting his son from criminal charges. I'm the son. I want to talk." She called me back within 2 hours. The interview took place the following afternoon at a coffee shop 40 minutes outside Hargrove. I brought Nate. Sandra brought a producer and a camera operator. I told them everything: the break-in, the security camera footage, my father's phone call to the detective, the conversation at the kitchen table, the photograph sliding across the tile. I told them I was there. I told them I was guilty of the same thing Derek and Mason were being charged with. And I told them that I believed no one, not even the son of a judge, should be above the law. Sandra asked me if I understood what I was doing. I said yes. She asked me if I was afraid. I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said, but I'd be more afraid of who I'd become if I didn't. The segment aired 2 days later. I'll never forget watching it with Nate in his apartment, seeing my own face on television, hearing my own voice say those words out loud to the world. My phone started ringing almost immediately. I turned it off. My father saw the broadcast. I know because Nate got a call from my mother at 9:47 p.m., crying, asking where I was, saying my father was, and I'm quoting, "not himself." I stayed at Nate's that night. The next morning, 2 things happened almost simultaneously. The Hargrove Police Department announced they were reopening my involvement in the Depot case in light of new information, and the State Judicial Conduct Commission announced they had opened a preliminary inquiry into Judge Richard Morrison. I turned myself in that afternoon. Nate came with me. We walked into the police station together, the same station my father had called, the same building where his influence had once been enough to erase my name from a report. The officer at the desk recognized me immediately. I could see it in his face, the recognition, the uncertainty, the quiet calculation of what this moment meant. I stated my name. I said I was there to answer for my involvement in the Hargrove Rail Depot break-in. I said I was surrendering voluntarily. They processed me, and because I was 16, and the charge was juvenile trespassing and breaking and entering, not a violent crime, not a felony, I was placed in the county's juvenile detention facility while my case was reviewed. I spent 1 night there. 1 night. I want to be honest about what that night was like, because I think it matters. The facility wasn't the horror story you might imagine, but it wasn't comfortable either. It was institutional in the way that hollows you out a little. Fluorescent lights, metal beds, the sound of other kids, some scared, some hardened, some just exhausted, filling the quiet spaces. I thought about Derek. I wondered if he'd been in a room like this one. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't regret anything. The following morning, I appeared before a juvenile court judge, not my father, obviously, who had been immediately recused from any cases that could even tangentially involve me. The judge reviewed my file. She reviewed the circumstances of my voluntary surrender. She reviewed the statement I had given, and the fact that I had come forward publicly, and of my own volition, before any warrant had been issued for my arrest. She spoke for about 4 minutes. She said that the law recognizes the difference between those who run from accountability and those who walk toward it. She said that my voluntary self-disclosure, my public statement, and my cooperation with authorities represented exactly the kind of civic responsibility the juvenile justice system was designed to encourage rather than punish. She suspended my sentence. I was released that afternoon with a period of community service and a requirement to complete a restorative justice program. I walked out of that building into October sunlight. Nate was waiting in the parking lot. He didn't say anything, he just put his hand on my shoulder. That was enough. My father resigned from the bench 11 days later. The Judicial Conduct Commission's inquiry had moved faster than anyone expected, partly because of the media attention, partly because the evidence was unambiguous. The phone call to the detective was documented. The detective himself gave a statement confirming he had been contacted by my father and asked to keep my name out of the investigation. 19 years on the bench. Gone. I've been asked many times how I feel about that, whether I feel guilty, whether I feel like I destroyed my father's life. Here's the honest answer. I feel sad. I do. Because I know my father believed, in some part of himself, that he was doing what fathers are supposed to do, protecting his child, using every tool available to him. He didn't think of it as corruption. Or if he did, he found a way not to think about it at all. But here's what I also know. Derek got a suspended sentence too, in the end. Partly because the case against him and Mason had weakened once my involvement was confirmed and the full picture emerged. Partly because the attention on the case brought scrutiny to how juvenile charges were being handled in our county. Derek's mom called our house 3 weeks after everything settled. She asked to speak to me. She said, "I don't know why you did what you did, but thank you." I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "It was the right thing." I'm 18 now. My relationship with my father is complicated. We talk. We're careful with each other in the way that people are careful when something between them has been broken and repaired imperfectly. There are things we don't say. There are silences that last too long. But sometimes, when the conversation finds its way to something real, I see something in his face that might be respect. Or maybe I just want to see it there. My mother has forgiven me, I think. Though she took longer, and the forgiveness came with conditions I'm still learning to navigate. What I know for certain is this. There is a version of my life where I stayed quiet, where my father's phone call held, where Derek faced a courtroom alone, and I went back to school on Monday and said nothing, where I carried that secret forward into every year of my life, growing heavier with each one. I don't want that version. I chose a different one. And whatever it cost, whatever it still costs, I'd make the same choice again. Because justice isn't something that happens to other people. It's something you either participate in or you don't. And I decided, at 16 years old, in a cold October kitchen, looking at a photograph of myself on a tile table, that I would participate. My name is Caleb Morrison, and this is my story. If this story meant something to you, if you believe that accountability matters, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for new stories every week. I'll see you in the next one.